Hi guys, and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. The last few weeks have actually been a little bit challenging for me because you probably all remember the time last year where I had to sit out 4 months due to a bit of a health issue, and I'm still dealing with that from time to time, and at the moment it's a little bit worse again. You may have noticed I posted a few less videos and I might look a bit skinnier as well, so I'm just trying to balance content creation with my health as well. And it's a challenge because I love making videos, I love interacting with all of you guys, so doing nothing isn't really an option for me, but I also have to make sure that I'm not going too crazy, and my energy is definitely much lower at the moment than what it used to be. So hopefully over the next few weeks I can fully deal with that issue and be back on track full speed. The last few weeks I was quite busy because Nikon approached me and asked me whether I wanted to test out their 180 to 600mm lens pre-release and make a video for the release. And of course I wanted to do that. So I took that lens out into the field with me on a Z9 for a couple of weeks and put it through its paces, and was really impressed by it, how it performed in the field, and was able to get some really nice photos and videos with it. And if you haven't watched the full review video yet, I think there's something you might want to do after watching this video. What really surprised me the most about this lens is the aggressive price point of just $1,700 US. So it's not only lower priced than the Sony 200 to 600mm lens, but it's also aggressively going after the third-party lenses from like Tamron and Sigma that are also priced in that lower dollar range. So pretty aggressive pricing from Nikon, but of course that is fantastic for us photographers because there will be more competition, and hopefully some other brands will also feel enticed to release a lens in that sort of price bracket. I'm looking at you, Canon. But whether they will actually do it remains to be seen. I have my doubts, to be honest. That brings up the question for me though, if Canon was to release a 200 to 600mm lens, where would you want to see that lens sort of sit in the lineup? Would you want to have it in sort of the style of an RF 100 to 400mm lens and cost like $1,500 to $2,000? Or would you want to see it as a more expensive, maybe $3,000 to $4,000 L lens with a probably better aperture, better overall quality and weather sealing? For me, that question is quite difficult because obviously we want to have it nice and cheap, but we'd also want to have nice features and fantastic image quality and stabilization. So I almost feel like Canon might not do this lens simply because it's almost like a lose-lose situation. Whatever you do, there will be a lot of people complaining about it. But on the other hand, I think if I had to pick one, a lower end version in the sort of $1,500 range, similar to an RF 100 to 400mm lens, would be quite nice and definitely something a lot of wildlife shooters would want, wouldn't it? What's great to see with Nikon is their continued commitment to improving their cameras via firmware updates. The latest 4.0 firmware update brought some nice new features like improved tracking and the auto capture to the Z9, something that should be amazing if you're using it for like remote camera work. It looks like the auto capture was also meant to go into the Z8, but then Nikon pulled it last minute in an probably effort to distinguish the Z8 and the Z9 a little bit more and justify the sort of difference in the prices. What do you guys think about that? Do you think the Z8 and the Z9 should basically be the identical cameras going forward? Or should Nikon make an effort to give those Z9 owners a few extra perks so they feel better about their true flagship camera? I think it makes total sense that the Z9 has a few features that the Z8 doesn't have. Speaking of Nikon and their cameras, there has unfortunately been already a recall for a lot of Z8 cameras. I'll link the link for you down there in the description where you can check out the serial number of your Z8, whether it's affected or not. And it seems like there's a big batch of cameras affected where sometimes you just can't mount a lens on the camera. And that's really not something you want to happen to you in the field. So it's worth checking out, and it's a free fix. You can send your camera to Nikon, but of course it's annoying to also send back your brand new camera to have it repaired. But better to have it repaired than not being able to mount a lens, isn't it? Before we move on to the next topic, I quickly wanted to show you how easy it is to use my PROSETS and get amazing results. All you need to do is install them, go to the drop-down menu in Photoshop or Lightroom, pick your favorite PROSET. There's a large list of different ones that will fit all your different styles of images. Select the right one and you're ready to go for the editing process. It's that simple, and from there you can follow my masterclass where I teach you step by step in Photoshop how to make your images shine and stand out from the crowd. So if you want to get better results when it comes to image editing and save time, make sure to check out my PROSETS and masterclass down there in the description. It certainly has gotten quite quiet in Canon land for the last little while. They've released literally dozens and dozens of entry-level cameras. There's basically a cheap mirrorless camera at every price point now from Canon, but it feels like they've started to, well, not neglect the middle to upper range, but there's definitely room for some improvement also when it comes to some more lenses. So hopefully over the next little while will we see some amazing gear from Canon, like a 200-500, R5 Mark II, R1, maybe that crazy teleconverter contraption unit they're building, and some other stuff. So fingers crossed it's not going to be too quiet in Canon land for too long. The same is true for Sony, where it has been very quiet in the sort of mid to upper range as well, except for a lot of vlogging cameras that they have released. And at least there we have the confirmation that we will likely see some new cameras very soon. The first one is going to be the A6700, that might even be still released in July, and then later on the A7C Mark II, and then down the track we'll likely also see an A9 III later this year. So a few exciting cameras from Sony coming up for sure, and I think the A6700 could be quite interesting for people, especially if they make the body a little bit bigger and a little bit more usable, because in the past I actually owned some of these cameras as well, but I just found them too small and fiddly and only used them for video B-roll, because for photos I just didn't really feel like they were too good. So if Sony could improve the design of the body and increase the size a bit, I think it could be quite compelling. So hopefully they don't make the same mistake that Canon did with the R7, where they could have made an amazing camera but somehow crippled it a little bit too much maybe. It's still a great camera, but there could have definitely been some room for improvement. So fingers crossed Sony is going to bring out a banger A6700 camera. And then later on, it will also be very interesting to see what they're going to do with the A9 III. Is it going to be the fastest camera in the world with like 50 frames per second? And how many megapixels is it going to have? Is it going to have more than 24? I think if it doesn't, it will be a little bit disappointing for us nature photographers, but I think a lot of sports photographers still like that 24 megapixel ranges. Could make sense to stick with the low megapixels, but it would definitely be nice to see it in that sort of mid 30 range maybe. What's a bit concerning is that Canon has yet pulled another firmware update. If I counted correctly, I think it's the third or fourth within the last year that Canon had to pull after release. This time it was for the R5C, where if you took photos in custom modes after the update, it somehow started to create those pixel shift really large files, which is totally random. And hopefully Canon will get on top of that, because I start to be a bit hesitant with installing new firmware updates when they come out, because it's just too frequent now that there is an issue right afterwards. And hopefully Canon can get that under control and maybe do some more testing before they release a new firmware to make sure that there's no weird errors happening once it's released. It also looks like Canon is about to increase the price for the EF to EOS R adapter. So for you in the market for an adapter to adapt your EF lenses to the new EOS R cameras, I think it would be a good idea to buy that very soon, otherwise you might be paying $50 extra. I've also finally gotten around to activating the channel membership here on this channel with a few nice extra perks for the members. So if you head over to my profile, you will see a little join button. And if you click that for a small monthly donation, you can directly support me in making more videos, which would be greatly appreciated. But of course, there's no pressure. If you don't want to do that, no problem either. It's just something, if you want to do it, I would definitely appreciate. So I will go ahead now, edit this video. I hope you're going to check out my other videos like the 180 to 600mm review. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you very soon. Bye guys.